to the tune of about 15 million Americans. This should have a very positive impact on their credit reports, credit scores, credit ratings. It's about $49 billion in total debt that's being reported. So it's an awesome thing. One of the projections is that they're thinking, when you look at what's going to happen with their scores, and I think two things. A, it's going to be an even better and greater impact than what they're forecasting.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Hey, we're in mid-January already. Can you believe it? But things are happening. New administration coming in, old one leaving, old one trying to do as many things as they can before they are shown the exit, which is imminent. But perhaps one positive thing that they're doing is eliminating, finally, medical debt from your credit report. And what does that mean to you? How does that help you? Well, our good friend from betterqualified.com, Paul Oster, is with us now. Paul, so this is a victory for consumers, isn't it?
This is probably one of the biggest victories for consumers in a couple of decades. So it's been a long time coming. They've modified and played around with this ruling for quite some time. That the message was clear from the beginning. The administration understands that medical debt shouldn't really continue to harm a consumer's credit rating. There's been numerous studies and surveys and all sorts of things that were done that proved someone who, has a medical debt collection, unfortunately, usually they are in a collection account by the time it winds up on someone's credit report, is not indicative of who they are as a consumer and their credit rating. So this is a big move.
Yeah, it's kind of like they took tax liens off a while ago because it's not a consumer debt. And really, when you get down to it, hospitalization or medical treatment, it's not something you as a consumer said, oh, I'm just going to blow a fortune on my credit cards and, my credit score be damned. This is something you had to do or your life could be in jeopardy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking, to the tune of about 15 million Americans. This should have a very positive impact on their credit reports, credit scores, credit ratings. It's about $49 billion in total debt that's being reported. So it's an awesome thing. One of the projections is that they're thinking, when you look at what's going to happen with their scores, and I think two things. A, it's going to be an even better and greater impact than what they're forecasting. So right now they're saying the average person is going to see a 20-point jump in their scores. Mm-hmm. And look, I've been doing this for over 20 years. If somebody incurs a collection from a medical debt, it could easily lose 100 points. So I think the score jumps are going to be greater than what they're predicting. But even if it was 20, 50 points, they're thinking that could lead to about 20,000 additional mortgage approvals applications every single year. And that's really big because the housing market is one way that we could pull ourselves out of this funk that we're in. It's not a recession. The markets seem to be doing well, but the average consumer is not. We're treading water and we're starting to drown. And you and I have spoken about it. I don't trust the job market numbers. I think they're too easily manipulated. So at the end of the day, we're stuck with higher interest rates, inflation, cost of every goods and service is, costing the average household in the United States. It's over $600 than it was 2 years ago. So that's a lot of money on top of everything else. So this really couldn't have come at a better time. Again, the one message I want to make very, very clear is that this is not debt elimination. This is not debt forgiveness. This is just a move by the administration, the current administration, to say to the consumers, medical debt is not going to have a negative impact on your credit rating moving forward, which in turn would have cost them more money for everything else. The lower the scores, the higher you pay for every single financial transaction. So again, couldn't it come at a better time? This was a great bipartisan effort from the administration, working very closely with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the FTC. And again, this is a win for the consumer.
Now, let's just fast forward. I want to get some of your forecasts here for the incoming administration. We're not talking politics. We're talking economics here. Is this a plus for consumers, incoming admin, a negative, or doesn't matter?
Well, it definitely matters. But again, it seems to me that people, especially if, it's hard to separate church and state and politics and the economy, but people look at the markets and, the growth, our GDP and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I look at it, you look at it from the consumer side of things. So until we can get wages, caught up to where they should be, the cost of living, it's really out of whack. So somebody asked me the question the other day, and they said, Paul, when was the last year that we actually had a good economy? Well, when you look at I'm thinking you got to go back to like the 70s because, when was it more affordable for the average consumer to buy a home, not just buy the home, maintain it, fuel it, put energy, electric, gas, durable goods, washers and dryers, buying a car. When was all of that stuff actually, affordable for the consumer? It's been decades. So we're behind, the eight ball when it comes to wages and, affordability for goods and services. When you look at that against what the markets are doing, and look, I think after January 20th, the markets are going to go bananas. He's so pro business, right? And not just domestic. You're talking about foreign relationships and foreign trade. I think the markets go bananas, but that doesn't always trickle down, to the consumer.
Right. And so what about inflation, though? Inflation you don't just take a pill and it goes away, right? It's a very intractable thing that often lasts decades.
Yeah. And that's kind of where my mindset is. It's very, very stubborn. We're very, very resilient. We continue to spend money that we don't have. So the market always sets the price. So it's almost impossible to walk it back. Once, price ranges are set in place for a reasonable amount of time, it's almost impossible to walk them back to where they, used to be, It's just a matter of playing catch up with everything else. So I think we're in for a little bit of a long haul here, much longer than, most analysts and people who watch the market and do forecasting and projections. They want it over right now. But like you just said, inflation's not just going away tomorrow. The 10-year note is at like a all-time high. So what that says, and that's why the market tumbled, at the end of the week last week, we might not get one rate cut in 2025. And in Q4 of 2024, people were thinking maybe 4 to 6 rate cuts, which would put us back into, maybe the 5% mark for mortgages. And, the prime rate would have just been so much lower. And I don't think that's happening. We might not get one rate cut. The jobs reports, the growth and the economy continue to almost defy the odds.
Yeah. Well, we have to look at the rest of the world. It's doing way worse than the U.S. and money a safe harbor, money looking for a safe place compared to the rest of the world, where else is it going to go? And,
Right.
Since I've been talking about this show, you always said the US dollar would be the last currency to go. It's the best looking house in the city of Baltimore,
No, it's absolutely correct. And again, one of the safest investments, tried and true, decades and decades and decades, is real estate. So that's where I've seen it before, where the real estate and the housing market has certainly, led the charge or been a significant impetus into digging us out of the hole that we're currently in. So I would love to see that happen again. Get people into homes that they can afford, to get approved for mortgages with, credit scores that are more indicative of who they really are. And that could help everything. With every home that's sold, there's like 119 indirect transactions that happen every single year. So if a person buys a home, wherever that local market is, the local banks, the local grocery stores, all of those local markets benefit from one person, purchasing that house. And again, whether it's maintenance on the house, lawn care, every single thing that happens within that home helps drive the local economy. So the more times we can, rinse and repeat with that, the better off we're going to be.
All right. Well, from your mouth. So as far as other things that people can do to try to mitigate or lessen the effects of inflation, what are the top 3 things you recommend?
Well, obviously, credit is a big driver here, right? So we said it before. So consumers have to understand a couple of things. Most people don't know what's on their credit report. So one of the good hangovers and leftovers from the pandemic is that consumers can now check their reports on a weekly basis. BC, before COVID, consumers only had access to those reports once every year. So we went from annually to weekly. So you could literally go to annualcreditreport.com. I say this with a caution, because I say annualcreditreport.com, you get a free credit report. People start searching free credit reports and you go to freecreditreport.com. That's not this website. Annualcreditreport.com is the FTC's website. Again, you now have weekly access to those reports. You don't need a credit card to verify 99 cents, a penny, nothing. If you're on a site that's asking you to enter credit card information, you've gone to the wrong site. So annualcreditreport.com is the best way for consumers to check the reports. You don't get your scores for free, which, again, we've been fighting this forever. You should also get your scores, but you don't need the scores. What you need is to pay attention and manage the information that's on those reports. Your scores are going to change. Basically, they change every 30 days when the bureaus update their reporting. Maybe you get your score from your existing credit card or something like that. But the information's always going to drive the score. So just focus on that for now. Go through the report. If you have late payments, charge-offs, collections, you have to be very proactive in your approach. So checking your report is like number 1. Number 2 is being proactive in building a new report. You can literally add open, active, positive accounts. There are credit builder accounts. There's some great companies out there. Self is one of them. Self, you can get secured credit cards. You could do credit builder loans. You could have your rental history added to your reports for free, by the way, through Self.
Sure.
So they charge a nominal fee for the credit builder loans, but it's worth every single penny. I suggest if and when you use Self and you take out a loan, quote unquote, from them, that you take the longest term available, because you want the credit history for as long as you possibly can. So if you had the option between 12 or 24 months, take the 24 months. right? As long as it makes sense, take the longer term because it's that monthly payment history that's going to drive your accounts. And the last thing, if you have $10 in credit card debt, you have to eliminate the credit card debt. And if you can't eliminate it, you have to work as hard as you possibly can to try and decrease it, right? So we're talking about the markets and interest rates and all this crazy stuff. There is no better return on your investment than paying down credit card debt. Most people are up over 20%. Some people are 29%, right? So every single dollar that you decrease your credit card debt, it's like getting a 20% or higher return on your money. No, there's not a lot of markets that are producing those kind of returns. So if you have credit card debt, you got to try and focus on it. You want to get it below 30% of your credit balances. That's your first goal and benchmark. And then ultimately it's to, completely eliminate it. You might want to try to use a 0% balance transfer card. You can only do that if you've gone over the number and formula 1,000 times, and you will be able to pay off the new debt, right? So you move money from one or two cards to a card with 0% interest rate. You might get 18 to 24 months to pay that off. You have to, because if you don't, you have now just cost yourself even more money because you pay a balance transfer fee no matter what, somewhere between 2 to 5%. Then, if you don't pay it off in time, you get hit with all the deferred interest anyway. So as long as you can pay it off, and a lot of times people are much more successful at 0% because most of the money that they're paying isn't going towards the principal balance. So if you can get a 0% balance transfer card, use it. Only make sure you can pay it off before the end of the term. It might be a time, if you can refinance, even at today's interest rates, a 7% mortgage is 1,000 times better than a 20% credit card, right? Or you take a short-term loan, borrow from your 401k, borrow from a family member. If you work, most people can afford the debt, right? So they're paying all the minimums, but they're just treading water. They're not paying off their debt. So if you say, you know what, all my credit cards together, my monthly payments are $425 a month, but I'm not paying off the debt. I'm treading water. So if you can borrow money and make that same payment, $425, it might even be lower, but you'll actually start to pay off your debt, then that's what you got to do. It's got to be priority one, get out of credit card debt in 2025. Do everything in your power to do it.
So I got to tell you a funny story here. I mean, it's not really funny, but I have a really good credit score. Well, I took advantage. I bought a new computer, Apple, and basically it's like interest free for the next year. And, it's a couple $1,000. Well, I do it, and it raised my utilization rate on that card, like, a couple $1,000, which made it up close to its highest point, almost to the max. And as a result, I lost 24 points off my credit score just from that. Even though it's still high, it went under 800.
So it's a great point, Kerry, because your utilization ratio, the people have to understand, your FICO score, all scoring models, your credit score has nothing to do with your income. Credit score is a big piece of the puzzle. The biggest piece of the puzzle is your payment history. The second biggest piece is your utilization ratio. And that's the difference between your credit limits and credit balances. So on your credit cards, it's both cumulative and individual. So like you saw, one card, you go over that 30% is the magic number. If your balances go over 30% of the credit limits, you will immediately see a significant decrease in your credit scores.
Yeah. Yeah. And nothing changed, nothing has changed.
Nope. You didn't make a late payment. You didn't have a collection, nothing except that utilization ratio.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And, I have my old computer. I'm going to sell it and just pay down the debt. So I just said, you know what? I'll just pay it down today. I paid it off 50%. I'm sure the it'll bounce back up, but you really need to be under 30%, don't you?
You sure do. You sure do. And, the next benchmark would be 10%. They actually have a category of high achievers, and that's for folks that carry small balances, anything less than 10% of the total credit limits. So 30% is the first benchmark. Pay your cards down below 30%, all of them cumulatively. But like you were saying, if you do have one card that is higher than other cards in terms of that utilization ratio, focus on that card. And you got to pay all your minimums on the other cards, but focus on that one card until you can get it below 30%, and you will see a significant point jump and an increase in your credit scores.
Yeah, it's just kind of ridiculous because, it's one card. My overall utilization rate, it said it went up from 1% to 2%. So, what are we talking about here? It's ridiculous.
Listen, sometimes we scratch our heads. Again, over 20 years in this industry, I've probably personally analyzed thousands of credit reports. As a company, we've probably done it millions of times. And sometimes we scratch our heads because it doesn't make sense. Remember, the algorithm and formula for the FICO scoring model, it's a more closely guarded secret than Coca-Cola, right? The recipe for Coca-Cola. We know that...
And probably as harmful. Probably just harmful as Coca-Cola, right?
Hey, it's just a slower death. That's all. But we know what the pie chart looks like. 35% payment history, 30% utilization ratio. But there are times when we look at a report and something like that happened to you, the only change was a slight increase in the utilization ratio, nowhere near the 30% benchmark, and the scores go down. Sometimes we look at reports and I say, I can't believe the scores are that high with bankruptcy or a short sale, foreclosure, charge-offs and collections. So it does work both ways. Unfortunately, most of the time we're scratching our heads and saying, I don't know why the scores are so low.
Yeah. Do you use a simulator to figure out what's going to happen in those scores?
We do. We have an awesome credit reporting agency called Smart Credit that we've partnered with them. There's, everyone talks about AI. Well, this credit report, it's called Smart Credit for a reason. The credit report does exactly what you're talking about. It can analyze all of your data and make some projections based upon trends. If you paid this much, you're going to get this jump. And they actually have pay down dates. So believe it or not, within each billing cycle, there are certain days that will give you, more bang for your buck. So if you're going to pay off a card, pay it off in between these 3 days. It's called the best pay down. Yeah, it's really powerful. So
crack the algorithm.
Yeah, but and I always say this too, especially for the younger generations. In today's world, they have access to so many free technologies, softwares, mint.com. You've heard me mention this company before. It's a great way because people don't look at all of their finances, expenses, and budgets. They know they get paid and they hope at the end of the month there's enough money left over to make it to the next paycheck, but they don't look at an analysis of your expenses. Again, where's the money going to come from? We're basically all on a fixed income. So any additional monies that we're going to, start this debt elimination process is going to come from cutting expenses. Most people have no idea they know, okay, I spend money on gas, I spend money on groceries, but did you ever really analyze it and look at it and say, wow, if I didn't stop at the convenience store every single day to and from work, I would save myself $340 a month. If I cut all my subscriptions, I would save $160 a month. If I did so there are ways to cut expenses. You just have to be aware of what those expenses are.
Let me ask you this. Is there a free service or a nearly free service available that can look at all your cards and list all your subscriptions and how you can get rid of them?
There are. So being able to figure that out, where, how you're paying for the subscriptions, there are a couple of free things that people can do. You can check your Apple subscription, your Google subscriptions. That's a great way to figure out what subscriptions are there. But then if you have Netflix, Spotify, Hulu, Xbox, Roblox, PS4, PS1, you're paying for them somehow. So take a look at your statements, credit card statements, bank statements, figure out what you're paying for, and then eliminate them. And again, you don't have to eliminate them all, or maybe eliminate them all for the time and duration that you're in this debt elimination program, and then add the ones back that you really, really miss. But cutting expenses is really the only way without taking a short-term loan. But even if you're going to take a short-term loan, figure out what your expenses are every single month. Look at a 3 or 4 month trailing and figure it out. What can I cut? And people are always, here's the good news. People are always surprised at how easy it was once they took the first step, once they got some momentum under their belt, and they started doing it. Every single day, we hear the same thing from our clients. I should have done it 6 months ago. I should have done it 3 months ago. So just start the process. Take a look at your expenses. Put a household budget together, figure out how you're going to eliminate debt in 2025, specifically credit card debt. The other debts are kind of like, we have to have them, right? You have to buy groceries. You have to buy gas to get to work. You have to pay your electric. You have to pay natural gas, however you heat your home, the energy. But most of the stuff, if we're going out to eat, if we're stopping for drinks, if all the recreation and leisure stuff, that's where you have to start these cuts for sure.
Agreed. All right. Hey, Paul, it's always a pleasure. Just tell us again where we find you, how we connect with you on the web.
Easy enough. Just go to betterqualified.com.
All right. Links in the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. We ask when you're there, please sign up for your free newsletter, as over 65,000 of your fellow FSN community members have. If you got a question for Paul, myself, shoot me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. Paul, we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, Kerry. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.